This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. As always, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast in the Apple Podcast Store and telling your friends about the podcast. I know a number of you have sent in questions for the episode with my wife and I. We have actually now recorded that. I do suspect that it will come out a little bit later, probably in December. It was a compelling conversation for both of us. I think it was intense and pretty raw and honest, so I'm hoping that it comes across when we share this in December. I also have done just a number of interviews that I am excited to share with you. So you can look forward to some really interesting conversations over the next few weeks. On to today's show. My guest today is Suandria Hall. Suandria is a psychologist. She's a nationally certified counselor, a board-certified telemental health counselor, and also a life coach. She's based out of Denver. Suandria has a counseling practice called My Choice, My Power, and you can find her at mychoicemypower.com. She grew up a preacher's kid and went through a deconversion process in her early adulthood. And she has just a really powerful story that I think you're going to find compelling. I'll also recommend here Suandria's Instagram account, My Choice, My Power Counseling. On her Instagram account, she has a number of pearls of wisdom, just things to keep in mind in the craziness of 2020 to keep your mental health. And I think it's well worthwhile checking that out. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Suandria Hall. Suandria Hall, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for saying yes and coming and chat with me.
Yeah.
So I want to go over just a little bit about your credentials, the work that you do. I'll let you fill in the details here, but you are a national certified counselor. You're a board certified telemental health counselor, and you do a lot of online work as well, but you're focused in Denver. Is that correct?
Yep. I'm home based in Denver, but my practice is virtual. So I see clients actually all over the world. In addition to being a clinical practitioner here in Colorado, I'm also a life coach. So that kind of broadens the scope and it makes for a very diverse group of clients.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the name of your practice is My Choice, My Power. I wonder if you would talk about that just a little bit, like that name.
Sure. So I focus on life transitions, religious trauma, and I do a lot of work with women. So the name of my practice, My Choice, My Power, came from me being a preacher's kid and experiencing how the power of choice became powerful for me. And I mean, it's a little bit corny, but it's the truth. I couldn't think of anything else that was befitting, and I wanted that to resonate with my clients as much as it does for me.
Right. So that is a good segue. I want to hear about your story. Let's start with what was your faith experience like?
Sure. So I'm a preacher's kid from the South, huge family. I identify as a Black woman, and a long line of preachers. My father, uncles, aunts. My mother's like a prayer warrior. My brother, and like that was life for us.
Right.
I was introduced as a child. Actually, my parents. They're from a really small town in Alabama. I'm from a small town. They're from an even smaller town.
Okay. All right.
And this tent revival came through eons ago, sawdust floors and all of that, came to their little town. And it was led by a Black couple. The woman was actually the main preacher. Husband was the pastor, but she was the main preacher. And charismatic, gorgeous, confident, strong. And this is like the 60s in the rural South. So can you imagine the impact she had on these, at that time, my parents were teenagers.
Right.
So she came through preaching the word and this amazing music and changed their lives. When you come to a group of people who maybe don't have so much, and
Mm-hmm.
you see someone that represents, wow, I can be that. I can be that financially. I could be that in my level of confidence and experience and exposure. That was really life-changing for my parents, and they were all in.
Right.
And later married and gave birth to me, and I was raised in that environment, myself, my brother, and my sister.
Wow. The first thing that just pops into my head there is that it almost seems like the church, and I mean this in the broad sense, has gone backwards. We had some fairly dynamic female preachers, evangelists. I'm thinking
Mhm.
of Amy Semple McPherson of the Foursquare fame, somebody like you're describing there. And it feels like it's interesting. Like, where are those preachers and evangelists today?
That's such a good question. I visited my mom a couple of months ago, and we were talking about just everything that's going on in the world right now, specifically in America, and how the church used to be like home base
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for these movements, and it wasn't so much about getting money and building these huge mega churches and filling up space, but it was the work of the community. And I asked
Right.
her that same question, like, what's happening, what's going on? And I think there's just been this inward turn, like make us better, make us grow, but not so much in the community. And it's disheartening.
Yeah.
For sure.
We're going to talk a bit about community and your work here a little bit, but I want to focus in on, again, your personal experience. Did you feel like you had a personal relationship with God? That was something that was, I'll phrase it this way. What was your experience of God?
So, like I said, I was born into this Pentecostal holiness environment,
Mm,
and it was life. I didn't know anything different,
yeah.
right? No other ways of thinking and being. But it wasn't until I was about, I think, 25 when I got for real saved.
Okay.
You
All
know
right.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
term?
Yeah.
I had moved from my small town in Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia. And one of my cousins, like I said, my entire family, we were just about that life.
Yeah.
My cousin introduced me to a church there, mega church, a Black minister. He and his wife, again, were just amazing. They took the experience that my parents had with that phenomenal charismatic woman pastor to the next level.
Right. Right.
And I thought, wow, I can be sold out for Jesus. I can be rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like God's a part of that thing too. And they really changed that experience for me. Like I said, I
Okay.
got for real saved and, just dived into this spirit-led environment.
Yeah. It strikes me again, and this was the point you were making with your parents and now here as well, that just having representatives, somebody that looks like you, somebody that
Mm-hmm.
you can identify with, who is showing some success, showing, like you say, confidence,
Yes.
ability, a talent they're putting on display. And that must be really profoundly impacting.
Absolutely. I mean, I was groomed for it, for
Yeah, true,
sure.
true. Yeah,
For sure. But that was definitely the worm on the hook because they looked like me.
yeah,
And it was an easy transition to really just dive in and follow that church, that ministry, those leaders, for
right,
sure.
right. Well, you and I wouldn't be talking if that was the end of the story. so, so describe a little bit about when and how did things start to fall apart, or was it sudden? Did it take a long time? What were some of the doubts that you experienced?
So I just started to question things. I've always been a reader. My dad had, tons of books in his reading space, and I would thumb through those. So it was important to read. Although with Jesus and the Bible, I didn't read in the way of questioning,
Right,
right?
right.
I just read what was given to me and any other, author that kind of supported these thoughts. I kind of stayed in there.
Yeah,
But I started to read more and more and just question some of the teachings that were given at that church. And I, I've always had a little bit of a rebellious streak.
sure, sure.
So I would push that envelope and say, this sounds like another way to get money from
Ah,
us.
yeah,
That was a big part of it. tons of things. There were things around, sexuality,
Yeah.
things around who I am as a woman, right? That was defined by this book and by these men. And it didn't really sit well with me. And I just, like I said, I started to question, I started to read, and it slowly just started to crumble.
Okay.
What used to be life for me, like I said, something that I was groomed for and could easily step in, just started to crumble, fall apart. I started to see the cracks. And then I started to study religion in general. Okay, all I know is Christianity. Let's see what else is out there. And you see this thread.
Interesting, yes.
Of familiar stories and concepts. It's like, well, who owns this stuff? Like, what is this from?
Yeah.
And I tell you, read enough books and you start to expand your circle of influence, right? Because everyone around me was Christian, whether you were living, that super clean Christian life or not.
Yes. Ostensibly Christian.
Yes. But that's who we were.
Right.
But when you start to introduce other people and hear other thoughts, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I don't think I believe this anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did listen to a couple of interviews you've done on podcasts previously, and one statement that you made that really struck me was that you had a moment of contemplating pretending, kind of staying in. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So you start to question, right? You start to doubt. It crumbles even further, and then you get to a place where you have to make that decision. At least I felt like I had to make a decision on, is this what I believe or is it not? What's more important to me than anything is being honest and being authentic about who I am and who I choose to be in this world. And while pretending for a moment seemed easy, because I really had no concept of how much I was about to unravel.
Right.
Once I make this choice to really say out loud that I don't believe this anymore, what does that even mean? Right?
Yes.
So that was the struggle. But I took a leap and I started to say that out loud, that I don't believe this anymore. I didn't know what I believed in that moment, but I knew what was happening right now is something very real for me. And I needed to give myself the space and the time and the energy, the courtesy, to explore it and figure it out.
Wow. I relate to so many things you've said there. The first of which is, you read the Bible with a particular filter on. And I talk a lot about it in my deconversion story that I did another read through of the Bible about a year before I no longer believed. And I was angry. I was like my wife was pointing out to me, like, why are you angry?
Yeah.
And I was completely unaware of this. Right. But I would, be at the, after reading, and it was that the rose colored glasses had started to fall. And I was really just reading the text as it is.
Yes.
And then just kind of being fed how it ought to be interpreted a little bit, and always seeing things within that lens. Let's talk some about your work. So what led you to decide to pursue psychology, and then to what extent is deconstruction, loss of faith, a part of your work?
Sure. So, like I said, I'm raised in a family of ministers, and, I saw them do beautiful things in our community. I watched my mom and dad take people in and just always helping people. To this day, that's who my family is. So I think there's just this natural part of me that wants to help people. So that was an easy part of my decision to become a therapist. But with religion starting to just unravel, I saw a therapist when I was going through this, and I saw a few actually. And I finally met one that just held space for me.
Right.
She was a Christian as well. She didn't quite understand what was happening and where I would land and all of that, but she just held space. But what I learned in that journey was that, wow, what would it have been like to have someone walk me through that in a very specific way. Again, not to tell me who to be, how to be, but the right question, the right context, kind of validate these feelings that I was having.
Right.
And why can't that be me?
Absolutely. What I find interesting is there's people like Brian Peck and the Religious Trauma Institute and that group of people, but it seems like such a small group of people. And this seems to me like a huge growth opportunity for counselors that, we have the era of the nuns, the NONES, the people who mark none of the above. Seems like there's a lot of people out there who are going to need to walk through that process.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Religious Trauma Institute is doing some really great work. Brian's actually a friend of mine.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
We do some work together as well. And, I think we share that. We know that this is a niche but it's needed. The moment I started to say it out loud, that I was a secular therapist, it was on one hand terrifying, but on the other hand, like, this is necessary. I need to say that. I need that to be distinguished,
right?
So that people can find me. Again, I thought about me and my journey and just wanted to really make that available. So my clients, it's a wide range. I still see believers, right? So I have believers, and then I have atheists, and everything in between.
Yeah.
What they're looking for is someone that doesn't force any type of spirituality in the practice. They just want to show up and say, let me just talk through some stuff.
Yeah. You have an Instagram page that is just a wealth of wisdom. I recommend everyone go and read your posts. And one of them kind of addresses this. You talked about initially after your deconstruction, deconversion process, you had some anger.
Yeah.
And that it's important as a counselor that you do your own work and you don't bring that to the counseling session. You want to expound on that?
Sure. That's part of, our education is you're learning about theories and people and communities and all of that, but you're challenged often to dig within your own heart, your own mind, to see what is happening so that you can show up healed. It gives you a level of experience that's very personal and very real. Adds that empathy that you can have with people. So I start with development, right? When we think about counseling in general, we know how important development is. Our caregivers, our parents, this is where we learn love and safety and what it means to be nurtured and connection. These are fundamental to our growth, right? So to put that in the context of this religious deconversion or adverse religious experience. So parents are that powerful, right? It's a gift. But then that parent gives that power away to God, to religious, strict religious teachings, to charismatic leaders. And so then the child learns that, oh, okay, so the love, the adoration, the loyalty, the devotion that maybe a mother and a child would share with each other is now shifted.
Interesting.
Yeah, so now God becomes the number one. But here's this being that is to be our source of love, right? But can't be touched.
Right.
Can't be held, can't hold you, remains distant, and then has all these requirements, right? Requirements to be loved and to be blessed and to be safe and protected. There's a list of requirements.
Yeah.
And back to me being a therapist that can help clients walk through this. We're in America where 90% of the population believes in God, some form, and that bleeds over into the counseling world.
Right.
So it really does make a difference when you walk into a room. So while we understand as the counseling community how important these foundational relationships are, we miss that shift when all of that power, all of that influence is now God's.
Right. You have, in a way, a deeper insight into the people who you are working with than maybe a religious counselor. They would not.
Yes. Yeah. There are things I'm going to say
Yeah. Yes.
that a religious counselor might not, or
Yeah.
might not be able to validate, or it may be extremely uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So in essence, what we're talking about here is trauma.
Mm.
And I'll tell you why. So trauma, it's when our bodies, our system becomes overwhelmed,
Mm.
flooded with emotions, flooded physically, like in our bodily sensations and things like that. So
Mhm.
it gets stuck, right? And we're unable to move through it.
Okay.
And someone will say, well, what does that mean as it relates to religious trauma? So we have these strict religious teachings, right? And they're given to us. So in natural development, a child is able to explore, to
Mm.
be curious, to learn by experience. It's a beautiful thing happening.
Yeah.
But when these young children are, as soon as they can think, told who they are, who to be,
Mm.
how to be, you're a man, you're this way, you're a woman, this way, these are your roles, this is what we do, this is what we believe,
Mhm.
that natural process is stolen. Emotions are stifled,
Mm.
learning is stifled. We don't see it that way. We think we're doing the best. I know my parents who didn't have much to give, this was the best they had to give. It was their way
Right.
of giving us a better life. So I understand it from that perspective. But having gone through this transformation, it's like, oh, I missed I missed some stuff. And I
Yeah.
understand why now as an adult, having left religion, I'm struggling with things that are very seemingly very fundamental and basic. It's like an arrested development.
Yes.
Mm-hmm,
And it
mm-hmm.
strikes me, like you say, the curiosity that children are incredibly attuned to the reactions from their parents. They
Yes.
want to make their parents smile. They want to have a sense of being proud of them. And so if their curiosity is asking questions that hit those boundaries that are start to be uncomfortable, they get
Yes.
the clear message, you don't get to ask those questions. And that definitely would stifle their growth.
No, there's a scripture that says, and it's been a while, but I'll try here.
Yeah, me too. I'm a bit rusty. Don't worry.
um, to cast down thoughts and everything that exalts itself against the knowledge of the word of God.
Right.
Right? Like you're literally taught
Mm.
to not allow any other thought in unless it's quote unquote biblical, and then you have all kind of interpretation. So even that's muddy.
Yeah.
But so anything that doesn't fall in line with the scripture, you can't even receive it.
Yeah.
Talk about your education, your experience being limited.
Yeah.
You have to find a scripture that validates, right?
Mm.
Or invalidates this new information. And that's how you receive. There's a constant filter on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I've done a lot of interviews with people and I hear stories as they get to tell them, I've seen a very striking difference between people who grow up in the church, particularly some form of fundamentalist theology, and people who have some conversion experience later in life. So I happen to be in the latter category. I was about 16, 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had kind of a slightly external perspective. And so it wasn't maybe as traumatic for me in the process. But man, for the kids that grew up with hell leaning over them, as much as the church talks about grace, it is very clearly communicated that this love that you're describing is conditional.
Mm-hmm.
If not these requirements, then that love isn't there. And like
Yes.
what that does to somebody, I just see my heart breaks for the challenges that people going through that process who grew up in the church have to deal with.
For sure. It's now the scriptures are coming back to me. And when I think about our emotions,
Mm.
right? Natural part of the human experience. But again, when you look at what is for me and in my interpretation and many of my clients, scriptures like, cast down fear,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? Don't even be afraid.
Right.
Like you can't even, again, you're told to resist, to deny. And these are natural parts of the human experience that we really need. And when people experience traumatic situations, be it child abuse and domestic violence, the tragedy of 9/11,
Mm.
what we're experiencing right now with
Yeah, 2020. Yeah.
Yes, I won't even go down the list. 2020 and everything that's happening there. It's psychology 101 when we treat these people who have had traumatic experiences. The point of it is to be reconnected with what's happening in our bodies, what's happening in our emotions, what we're thinking. Like, part of healing from a traumatic experience and coping while we're going through a traumatic experience is being connected with ourselves, allowing ourselves to feel, allowing ourselves to let those emotions rise and fall. This is a natural part of, again, the human experience.
Right.
What religion says is no, you're not going to do that. We're going to stifle those emotions. We're going to cut them off. And, you know, I remember we would do confessions in the church I was in. I mean, screaming at the top of your lungs about, you know, again, the casting down, and this is what I want. The devil won't do this, like all of this stuff. Again, you're pushing down, 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 and away what you're actually experiencing.
Right.
And here's the thing, when we do that, we silence the parts of our brains that, tell us about fear, alert us to fear and danger, but we also silence those parts that tell us about joy and love and hope. So in my work with my religious trauma clients, we're trying to bring all those parts back together. And it can be very scary and uncomfortable, because with that becomes the fear, the rage, the anger.
Yes.
But we have to open that door to receive the love and the joy and the peace and to feel safe within ourselves again and in our emotions again.
Yeah. For me, something I've been focusing on a lot in my description of humanism, something I call secular grace, is a lot about just embracing my own humanity, which includes all that, real imperfections. Here, I'm not referring to sin, just, we are prone to error. We make mistakes, and just being able to be super honest with myself about when I make a mistake, when I do something wrong, right? When I do something good, when something is like you say, joyful, something that's meaningful, and just embracing the humanity for myself and embracing the humanity of others. And it seems like in many ways that religion, Christianity specifically, seems to kind of try to wipe away that humanity to, we have to be victorious, or, there's this, this almost constant living in a false reality.
Yeah. And there's so much to learn in our mistakes, right? And not just having them, but being able to truly connect with them. This is what I did. This is what I said. This is how it made me feel. This is how it made another person feel. But when you have that religion, again, that religious filter, the answers are there. People can hold so tightly to their beliefs and cause you extreme pain. But if they feel like God said to do this, they don't even care. They're not even connecting to that part of humanity that says, I should probably care about how I'm making another human being feel right now. But again, I have this validation from God.
Right.
That said it's okay to do this.
I'm literally on a mission from God. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I was reading this study, and it looked at the well-being of people in religious dominant countries versus secular dominant countries. And what it found was that religious people in religious dominant countries fared well. They felt happy and connected and secure. They just fared better, right? And then religious people in secular countries didn't. They struggled. So it wasn't about whether or not their faith was giving them this sense of well-being. It was about the community, the social structure. It was about what's around that really supported what they believed or didn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I really want to expound on community here. I think in particular for the Black church, that seems like is such a central part of the Black experience in America, is to be connected to a church community. And then to expand beyond that, to say that I often say the magic of Christianity or religion is the people, is the community, and that we can actually acknowledge that it's the people, being able to walk into a room and have 12 people say, "Oh, I missed you. I love you." And like that, we need that. We're hardwired for that kind of
Yes.
connectivity. But there's nothing supernatural going on there. That is people, humans to humans loving each other,
Yeah. Yeah. We've attributed to supernatural though.
Right. It's true.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember those high emotions of being in church. My dad's a musician. He passed away a couple years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. He's a musician, so music was always in our house. We had it at church, and it was like magnificent. And any kind of music, if you're into it, your emotions are there, right?
Yeah.
But if it's in church, we call it spiritual, the Holy Spirit. This is why we dance. This is why we do all these things. So that love, that force, that energy that we get from just connecting with other human beings, celebrating with other human beings, grieving with other human beings, that's available to us all the time. But we've said that that's only in church.
Yeah.
And to find it outside of church, I will admit that's difficult. One, because it's just not readily available. Where you find a group of people coming together at the same time every week for this purpose, right? It's a plug and play thing here. But again, as you start to unravel all of this religious doctrine and these rules and start to walk in your own identity, you start to expand social circles and groups, and you start to create those for yourself. And you can find people that you can spend this time with and experience that kind of love. I mean, me and my friends will dance. We'll dance on Marco Polo. It's similar to like Zoom.
Yeah.
Like wherever we can find it, we connect that way. So it's available. It's different.
Yeah.
It's different, but it's available.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've told this story on mic before, but my family are still believers. Everybody's a believer still. And just recently, my daughter and I, we were like cleaning the kitchen or something. We had Snoop Dogg's gospel album on. Which I don't know for listeners if you're into gospel or not, but I mean it's a beautiful album. Just like if you like gospel, it's beautiful. And we were just dancing, and like I was like, I stopped her at one point. I said, your atheist dad is dancing to gospel music, and just kind of the absurdity of the moment. And yet we were having so much joy. We were connecting to each other, and just was a real moment. It was really deep, profound moment, really.
Yeah, I still listen to some of it. It's beautiful music and it's moving. Some of it is very uplifting. Like I dig it. It's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, in healing trauma, one of the things that really helps clients to move through that hung up emotion and that hung up those sensations in our body is to move.
Yeah.
Right. So I think about these things as I've learned this. It really helps me reflect on my experience in a different way. And we were dancers, right? You go to a Black church and we're going to tear the church down. Like, that's what we do. Yeah. And it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good to let that go, to release that way. And you go home feeling like, woo, I'm healed. I got it.
Yeah.
But we know that religion acts more like an ointment, right? Just a little something on top of the scar that temporarily keeps it from getting dirty again, temporarily keeps it from getting infected. But the real work requires that inner, deep, emotional, hard look at what you're really experiencing. And that's the part we miss. So sure, listen to your music, dance. Like I said, I have clients that are, wide range. People are still there. I'm just like, how do we get you to a place where you feel more confident in yourself, right? Yeah. Where you haven't given away all of your power, your ability to critically think, your ability to enjoy sex.
Yeah.
To, just live.
Right. I again, from some other interviews of you talked about you will often do a walk and talk in the before times. That it strikes me what you say is very true. Just the motion itself,
yes,
in some ways allows us to connect to our inner life in a way that maybe just sitting at a desk or sitting across from somebody doesn't do. So how's that a part of your work?
Yeah, so, you know, talk therapy helps, right? But it's the intent and it's the words that we use, and it's the focus that we're bringing forward in those sessions. And part of it is the sensations in the body. Again, trauma is all of that being hung up, is stuck somewhere. It's almost like it stamps that moment in time. Your body does. So it's not just what you think about it. It's not even just what you feel about it, the emotions, happy, sad, anger,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also how your body is reacting.
Okay.
The headaches, the tense shoulders, the stomach aches, like these are also happening as we experience things in life. And through this work with trauma, we're giving language, we're giving words to what has been unspeakable.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, you've been silenced, right? You've been told how to be, who to be, when to feel, what to think, all of that. So there's so much silence going on. So as clients start to reconnect, it helps to loosen up the body, move around a little bit. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? I'm always asking, what are you feeling? Not just emotion. What are you feeling in your body? Let's talk about that. When we talk about that experience with that pastor, and someone kind of gets it's okay, where is that right now for you? Where is that? I'm very intentional on helping clients see that, and that helps to release that, and you can move forward, move through it and move forward. Yeah.
And I think, just some form of exercise as well is important,
Yes.
like whether that's yoga. In my case, I'm a runner, and I feel like that is my meditation,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm working stuff out, I'm out on the
Yes.
run, and like there's something about those endorphins you get from just moving your body around. And I think it's actually really beneficial.
Absolutely. For me, it's hiking.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's my go-to. I could go for miles, and I
Yeah.
enjoy the movement, the sounds, the trees, the wind, the sun, all of it. Yeah.
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 And the experience in nature, or just of awe, that is to recognize that, like you said earlier, that awe isn't, it just doesn't happen in church alone.
Yes.
It happens in many places.
Oh, I love that. The awe.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so real. And to give ourselves the permission to do that.
Yeah.
We laugh at people and call, tree huggers. I have some friends who call me a tree hugger. It's like, yeah, I do. I think they're magnificent.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I point out, like, I experience awe, in the mountains, on the river, in the
Mhm.
ocean. And it's like, these things are quite literally bigger than ourselves. And there's something very powerful about just recognizing that is the human experience of being next to something that is more powerful than you are, and just literally experiencing humility. And that, again, we don't need any supernatural elements for that to be true.
Absolutely. And I like that you said that, experiencing something that's greater than you, also experiencing something that's the same as you.
Yeah.
Because again, in church, there's so many hierarchies,
Yeah.
right? And we're all serving up and worshiping up. I think one of the biggest influences on me being able to go deeper in love is my daughter, right?
Yeah.
She's a tiny little thing. She's 4, and I'm in awe of her every day.
As
I
you
am
should be.
I am I'm humbled by her presence. I'm humbled by, you know, she gets this freedom to explore that I didn't have. And just
Yeah.
watching that is just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's beautiful. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in awe every day.
Yeah. They're autonomous human beings. I think I was, my kids are teenagers now, and it's that whole process of just watching them each developmental stage as they took more autonomy on for themselves
Mhm.
is just, it's shocking. It's humbling. It's an amazing process to watch.
It is. It's nothing like it. And to be a part of that, again, again, with all the humility that you're required to walk inside of religion, because nothing can belong to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If it's good, it's God's. If it's bad, it's the devil. You just get to skate through and not have any responsibility.
Yes.
But yeah, just owning the fact that I had a part in creating her,
Yeah.
it's flooring. to me. And I don't give that to anyone except her father.
Yes, yes.
But we did that, and I get to feel the weight of that gift, but I also feel the weight of that responsibility. I don't give that away,
Right.
right? It's mine, and it helps really guide me on being an intentional parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that your daughter will grow up sensing your ownership of that responsibility and weight.
Mm-hmm. I sure hope so. I sure hope so. And I give her hers. Like, no, honey, this is yours. You get to make this choice. You feel that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking this a bit out of order. I probably should have started with this, but you've mentioned a couple of different semi-technical terms: religious trauma or trauma-informed, and adverse religious experience. Can you talk about what those are? What do they mean? And then how do they apply to the work that you do?
So like I said, it can be a one-time experience. It could be something that's happened over the years. There are things that multiple kinds of experiences at one time over the years, things that are passed down. So all of us have probably had some kind of experience that was difficult, but not everyone has trauma, right? So that's kind of the thing that you're trying to work through. And an adverse religious experience, I like that term. That came from the Religious Trauma Institute. I like that because I'm not anti-religion,
Right.
and again, because my experience, I have beautiful memories of my time in church, specifically when I was a little girl. Just like I said, the music and my family was there. It was wonderful. It was like, a family reunion every week.
Yeah.
So I understand what people can get from it that can be helpful.
Right.
But I also know the realities of adverse religious experience, the pain that it can cause, the sometimes intentional hurt, and sometimes they didn't know. I know for a fact my mother would never intentionally hurt me.
Right.
Right? That wasn't her intent, her or my father's intent in introducing me to Jesus and Christianity, but it happened. So I think it's important to make that distinguishment between, are you anti-religion or I'm pro-people?
Right, exactly. This is something
Mm-hmm.
I've really been trying to communicate a lot lately. Again, this idea of embracing the human beings within humanism and saying,
yes,
human beings are prone to answers that may not have lots of evidence.
uh-huh.
If you call yourself an atheist, you can say, oh, well, they're being illogical or what have you, but we aren't Vulcans. We're human beings. And so
Yes.
embracing that is to care about the whole person, which may include religious beliefs, what have you, and just being able to talk to that person and actually not see them as dysfunctional in some way or another, right?
Right. What does it do for you? How is it serving you? Like, those are important questions that I have with my clients. We're not, pulling the rug from under people. Like, you have to work this stuff out piece by piece, and you want people to feel safe and ready to move through this process. And like I said, for some, they remain just in a different way. Some develop this new sense of spirituality. Some leave it all together. It's, I didn't leave, all this knocking on people's doors, proselytizing for Christianity to take on a new version of that, right? I'm not telling you that I have the answer for your life. I believe that you have the answer for your life.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not sure what that is just yet because of all of this trauma that's happened, all of this silencing that's happened. But it's nothing like you getting there and feeling that and owning that and it walking in power in your life.
Right. Yeah. Both the most terrifying aspect and the most joyful, freeing aspect is that you suddenly realize that you're responsible for yourself, for your own ethics, for what you do, how you treat people. It can be scary, but it's also very freeing.
Oh my gosh, that is high on the list. Like, okay, so now that I hold all the cards, what do I do and how do I trust myself? And like I said, it's a bit of arrested development. We're now, oftentimes these are adults who are going through this transformation, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. I've never had to do this for myself. I have women that have been so committed to their faith and to their husbands that they don't know how to live on their own. They don't own their bodies. They don't own their finances. They don't own their thoughts. They barely own their not own, but have an influence in their children's life. Everything's been given away.
Right.
So you get here and it's like, oh wait, it's up to me. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's a little by little unraveling, a little by little build of your new value system, or an edit. Like I said, everyone doesn't throw everything away. And confidence and seeing yourself and knowing yourself and becoming reacquainted or meeting for the first time the real you.
Ooh, I love that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the process from your perspective, from the psychology perspective, of changing one's mind. So when I describe my deconversion, the immediate aftermath was, this sense of the cognitive dissonance being gone. I was unaware of it. I was oblivious to the fatigue-inducing cognitive dissonance. I personally had a fairly sudden admission or recognition, and just this immediate sense of laying some burden down that I didn't know I was carrying. Is that common? When you are working with people, do they suddenly become aware, or is it often a very long process? But how do you work with people especially when you can recognize they're carrying some cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, usually if they come to me and they reach out to this secular therapist.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
they've probably worked through
yeah,
quite a bit of that, or at least maybe that top layer. And then it just becomes these pieces, right?
Yeah.
Thinking for myself, owning my sexuality. What do I do with my money? What about mortality? Like it becomes like section by section. They're starting to work through these things. And we do some good old fashioned CBT. We do some challenging of thoughts. We look at what's reality and what's not. Part of healing trauma is to be able to see, experience, observe the world and yourself, and be able to label things as this is real and this isn't.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, the mere fact that we're talking about religion and God or gods.
Yeah.
There's the struggle, which is again why some clinicians who aren't ready for religious trauma work, that can be difficult, because if you believe it's all real and you have someone that's not, part of their healing, they need to be able to differentiate what's real and what's not. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm sorry, this is a bit tangential, but I grew up, my dad passed away when I was very young. It was very likely suicide. It was very likely mental health induced. Part of how that presented was him becoming very, very religious, knocking on doors, that kind of thing. And I remember just growing up, people talking about, well, he was probably a part of a cult. Yeah. And not knowing like, how is this a cult and this isn't? And never quite being able to define that. And I find now on this side of the opposite side of faith, that's because it isn't definable, right? If you can't point to it and show some evidence or tangibly touch it or have something real, like you say, the difference between things that are real and things that are not. If you can't actually call that out, there is no way to define this is a cult and this isn't.
And that's the struggle in our field, right? We are in like I said, a predominantly God culture.
Yeah.
So it's a very thin line on what people want to say is real and not real, right? We have people that hear voices and they're told to do things. And depends on whose name that is in.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know.
Is this okay? Or is it not? It's a very touchy subject. It adds to the work that me and my colleagues are doing to bring awareness, to speak truth, to validate these experiences that people are having and not push them away. Because some people are told to return to God. Maybe you just experience God in a different way, a wrong way, a bad way.
You just had the wrong version of God.
You had the wrong version. And I feel like the only, the institutions that encourage people to return to abusers are religion and family, right? Because these
Yeah.
are pillars of our community. And that's when your caregiver is both your source of love and validation, but also pain and abuse, that creates some turmoil inside of a human being.
Mm.
Mhm.
Wow, I love that. Just going through the process of recognizing what is real and what isn't, because
Yeah.
so much of the religious experience is saying, look at how beautiful the emperor's clothes are. That's literally
Mm-hmm.
kind of a daily experience, and being able to let that go, it must be just
Yeah.
very freeing.
Yeah. I mean, like we talked about a minute ago, just part of the human experience, and we make mistakes, we do bad things, wrong things, painful things, and
Mm.
that's part of it. But when you're in an experience that doesn't allow that to be attributed to God or the beliefs or the teachings, you're constantly, again, you're pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. I remember, and my condolences to you about your dad.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
When my dad died, he battled cancer for a number of years. And when he finally died, I remember sitting at his funeral, the preacher was saying, we knew God would heal him.
Mm.
Get this, we knew God would heal him on this side or the other.
Right.
But we can never, right? We can never be mad at God,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, right when you're probably experiencing rage. I
Yeah.
don't know if you were a believer at the time, but yeah, you just, the loss. I actually, sorry, I'll send you the the checks in the mail. I lost my mom too, about 8 months after my deconversion. And
Wow.
I talk about that. That was both very hard, but also super freeing, because I could truly grieve her. There was nothing,
Yes.
I wasn't having to say, I get to see her again. I could experience the full weight of that loss and
Yes.
say goodbye and let go. And, again, not an easy process. Going through it, I was, reminiscent of or nostalgic for a time when I could believe, I get to see her again. But I feel like that grief was more thorough,
Yes.
was more real, was more raw, more honest, because I could recognize reality that she was no longer with me.
Yeah, I totally get that. And when my dad died, I was long gone. I was long gone.
Okay.
But the grief was very, very different. I knew
Mm.
that it was final, right? And something
Yeah.
about that just gave me a real sense of closure.
Mm-hmm.
And I really cling to the memories of him in a different way than I experienced grief when I was inside of religion.
Right.
Those memories mean everything to me. I giggle about them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
They just live with you in a different way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you feel my mom lives on in me, right? The jokes that I
Yes.
tell to my kids, and I'll be like, your grandmother would have loved that. Like that lives on because she's in my memory. And that is the way that humanity has dealt with death for time immemorial, regardless of how we contextualized it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, so my daughter, and I could talk about her all the time, so
That's
bear with
okay.
me, but she doesn't have a concept of death, not for real.
Sure.
It's insects and worms die,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's
Yeah.
that's the
Yes. Yeah.
extent of her concept of death. But as her parent, I know there's going to come a day when she's going to ask me about death,
Yeah.
and what that means. And it's probably easier on a parent to be able to say, oh, you're just going to go to sleep and go to this beautiful place, and then I'll see you there one day, or
Right.
you'll see me, like we're going to all be together. Like, I get why that seems like a good choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
In the
it's
moment, it seems like a totally rational thing to do. Yeah.
absolutely. But the other side of that is only if you're a good person, because if you're not,
Yes. Yes.
then one or both of us will be in hell for the rest of our life. And we miss the part about how important right now is,
Yeah.
right? Because we're living to make it to heaven, escape hell. But we miss the value, the depth, the gifts and connection and now, and what we do and how we treat people. Again, it's about shirking responsibility sometimes. I don't have to worry about it. As long as I do what God said, I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
I don't really
Yes.
care what you people are doing. But when you don't have that, your hope is right here and right now.
Right.
It changes how you work, how you live, how you treat people, your social engagement, all of it. It reshapes your life.
And every moment with your daughter is rich with
Yes.
meaning and joy, even in the bad times, even when I'm arguing with my teenagers, like I am able to step back and say, this is precious time that I have with them, because time is the thing that we have no control over.
Yes, it is the hottest commodity, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Suandria, I don't want to let you go without talking about just the kind of the moment in time we live in. 2020 has been hard. And that is the understatement of the year. Just literally before you and I began chatting, my best friend and I were texting to each other, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing good." And then I texted back about 2 minutes later. I was like, really, I should just say I'm coping, because it's been hard.
Yeah.
This is kind of an impossible question, but do you have any advice for those of us who are just trying to survive everything that is going on right now?
Yeah, I wish I had an answer that would fix everything for everybody, but I don't. What I offer, like we said a minute ago, that time is all we have right now, and how we treat people and how we treat ourselves and what we're honest about. And I think it's important to lean into that, to be truthful about what we care about, what we're scared of, and why. This time gives us an opportunity to talk about challenge thinking. Like, if I feel this way about a person or a group of people, or about what I'm hearing from, this politician or that one, what about it makes me hold on to it so quickly, or resistant so quickly?
Yeah.
Right? And I think about that again in that religious context. We're groomed for certain things. We can be groomed for horrible things, right? Yeah. And like I said, I think this is a time that we can really dig out some of that and really see some real healing in our individual lives, in our families, our communities, and in our nation. But it doesn't happen without pain. And I think we're just smack dab in the middle of it. But again, opportunity for healing, opportunity for connection and care and love for one another that we otherwise wouldn't experience. So I try to look at it that way. It doesn't make it less painful and heavy, but I find purpose, not necessarily in it, but in this moment. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have each other. That's what we have.
Yes.
And let's make a plug here too for, people, you need a little more help contacting Suandria or someone else or like the Secular Therapy Project or the Religious Trauma Institute, getting somebody who is going to dedicate time to just listen to you, be able to tell what you're feeling is super valuable. And that was looked down upon in some churches, looked down upon as like, maybe you're weak or your faith isn't strong enough. But on this side of faith, we can say, hey, I need some help.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just real quickly, I did part of my internship at a church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I did. And I was intentional about that because I wanted to work with everybody. Yeah. I'm not about this exclusion stuff on any level. So I was intentional about working at a church, and it happened to be a church that they believed Jesus saved you, but you got to do some work
right,
to get cleaned up. And I was like, all right. So they had a program there for therapists.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was interesting. So I had people from the church and people from the community, and it was just a magnificent experience. So yeah, like if you want help, it's available, and it's available in different ways, but this work is very specific. And, I'm intentional about what I say, what I share, because I want that to be clear about the work I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. How can people get in touch with you and your work?
Website is mychoicemypower.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at mychoicemypowercounseling.
Excellent. And I highly recommend the Instagram. It's just like an oasis of hope in 2020.
Thank you.
I will have links in the show notes for those. So Suandria, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Final thoughts on the episode. Wow, I need to send a check to Suandria for that counseling session. That got deep in a number of times. I really appreciate Suandria for talking about grief in such a real way, allowing me to talk about grief in a real way. It's something that I don't think we address very often. Suandria has such a very real way of communicating the process that she's gone through. You can tell that she would be completely fair for people who are still believers who would engage with her. I want to make just a plug in general for secular counseling and Suandria specifically, that so many, I think, have been in a church environment where counseling was off limits, and especially during 2020, if you need someone to reach out to, I definitely can recommend Suandria. Her counseling practice is at mychoicemypower.com, and you can find her there. Also, again, I'll recommend her Instagram account, My Choice My Power Counseling. I want to thank Suandria for being so honest and so raw and telling her story. I particularly was moved by the discussion of representation, as well as her acknowledgement of being groomed for ministry and realizing later in life that that wasn't for her. She had too many questions. I appreciate her kindness in the way she sees her former faith community. I really appreciated our conversation about awe, talking about being parents and being in awe of our children. So thank you again, Suandria, for being on the show. I'm going to hint just a bit about the upcoming episodes that I have. I have had the opportunity to talk with Ian Mills, who we discussed in my conversation with Randall Rouser on the topic of metaphysical naturalism, but also his expertise is in 2nd century New Testament and the way that the New Testament was put together. It's an incredibly honest conversation, an incredibly well-informed, and to be totally honest, academic discussion where Ian was talking way over my head a whole lot, but I still think it's a really valuable conversation. I'm also about to do an interview with Barrett Evans, the author of The Contemplative Skeptic. Barrett is very much a naturalist. He may call himself an agnostic. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to interview him on that point. But he has written a book that is kind of a devotional that looks at kind of the deep questions of life and the answers that various philosophers and religious thinkers and secularists have come up with over the years. And anyway, it's an incredibly fair and balanced look, a very nuanced look at what it means to be secularly spiritual, however you want to define that. So that's upcoming. And then the most exciting thing for me to say is that Michelle and I did, in fact, record the episode for our discussion about being unequally yoked. It was an intense conversation. I think it will be incredibly valuable. Look for that to come in December. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. Time for some footnotes. The song is a track called Waves by Micaiah Beats. Please check out her music. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to help support the podcast, here are the ways you can go about that. First, help promote it. The podcast's audience grows by word of mouth. If you found it useful or just entertaining, please pass it on to your friends and family. Post about it on social media so that others can find it. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. This will help raise the visibility of our show. Join me on the podcast. Tell your story. Have you gone through a faith transition? You want to tell that to the world? Let me know and let's have you on. Do you know someone who needs to tell their story? Let them know. Do you have criticisms about atheism or humanism, but you're willing to have an honesty contest with me? Come on the show. If you have a book or a blog that you want to promote, I'd like to hear from you. Also, you can contribute technical support. If you are good at graphic design, sound engineering, or marketing, please let me know and I'll let you know how you can participate. And finally, financial support. There will be a link on the show notes to allow contributions which would help defray the cost of producing the show. If you want to get in touch with me, you can Google Graceful Atheist, or you can send email to gracefulatheist@gmail.com. You can tweet at me at GracefulAtheist, or you can just check out my website at gracefulatheist.wordpress.com. Get in touch and let me know if you appreciate the podcast. Well, this has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Grab somebody you love and tell them how much they mean to you. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.